Back in race weekend, and now we're starting to have a triple header with Circuit of the Americas, Mexico, and ending it off with Brazil. I mean, what a lineup for the three, but today we are talking about the Circuit of the Americas. Let's do a track preview talking about the sectors, which team will be strong there, and in general about this track, what we should expect with the tire wear, and what type of setups each team will run, because that will make a difference between which team will be strong or not. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. We're doing amazing on subscribers and liking. Genuinely means the world when I read your comments and see what you guys are saying. You guys are the best, so thank you for the support. But if you haven't subscribed, please do and like the video. It means a lot for me. Let's continue and talk about Circuit of the Americas. Okay, so here is the track layout. It is a very interesting track. When you look at it, this track is actually most similar to something of a mix of Baku, but the track it's most similar to is Miami, funny enough. Why is it most similar to Miami? Well, Miami has its fair share of slow corners, but not many of them. Has some medium speed corners, but mainly it's a straight and a couple of high speed. And that is kind of what Circuit of the Americas is. It's a very good overall track. You have Sector 1, which is a mix of Maggots and Beckett's. Literally, it's inspired off of that, but going into turn 1, you have a lot of elevation going into turn 1. Turn 2, huge downforce needs to be put there because of the elevation, but also getting that turn right is super dependent on how the rest of your lap will actually be. Obviously, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 are the Maggots and Beckett's part, which Maggots and Beckett's are that little S part in Silverstone. Then you go into the more Baku-esque type part of the track, which is 10, 11, and 12. These are obviously pretty much straights. And then you go into its very curvy sector. This is very similar to almost a better version of what I would say the Miami track is in its slow speed. And track limits here are going to be looked out for. Definitely going into 15 will be looked out for, but as well as 13, because they love to push as much as they can on these track limits, and it really does put an impact on time. Last year we saw Max and Hamilton duel it out, and Max was one away from getting a track limit. Lewis was trying to push it to the limit and also getting almost a track limit. So we'll see that again, especially in qualifying. Expect some deleted laps. It's very important that teams get this right. But what does this really encompass for us? Because there's straight, there's some medium speed corners, there's some slow speed. What type of setups, what type of rear wings are we going to see? Well, last year, if you guys remember, the Aston Martin had that weird stool rear wing, the whole loophole that they had. They actually ran it here and were very successful. Red Bull also ran a medium downforce, and Mercedes also did. Now, some teams liked going for a more lower downforce setup, and they were more successful in qualifying, but in the race were falling back. This is because this race will be a two-stopper, probably a medium hard strategy, making it already for an exciting race. I mean, if you've looked at the past for Circuit of the Americas, it has never not had a great race. It's one of those tracks that just always provides a banger. It's kind of like Brazil, so you got to respect it in that way. And honestly, out of all the tracks we have in America, this one always performs and really brings out the best out of Formula 1 cars because of its Sector 1 and Sector 3. In my personal opinion, it always provides. We also had that crazy crash from Alonso in 2022 with Lance Stroll. Hopefully nothing like that gets caused again, because that was a scary one and a lot of G's going down. Still finished the race and finished in the points, which was insanity with a broken front wing. So it comes to show you where Fernando Alonso is in retrospect to other drivers. Insanity. Going with those medium downforce rear wings, which type of teams are going to succeed successfully? We could see, as I said, a mix of low downforce and medium downforce. I'm gonna say that most teams are gonna go medium downforce. Maybe Ferrari will go on the more lower downforce aspect so they can actually provide in qualifying. And they've actually been running that car in a lower downforce aspect anyways, because it actually suits the car. And on tracks like this, they've been pretty successful. They've actually been pretty decent. And since the upgrades, they've been working pretty well on every track. So I would not count them out, but that's not the teams that I think are really going to be at the top. McLaren has really been the talking point mainly for the second half of the season because of how successful they have been. What a performance over there in Qatar, but this is far from what Qatar is going to be in Japan. This is a completely different track. Regardless of that though, I think Sector 1 will be dominated by McLaren. Red Bull will be a close second in Sector 1, but the Red Bull is going to start pulling in Sector 2. With a main straight, they still have a big DRS advantage on McLaren and really just an overall top speed on McLaren, whether that be medium downforce, low downforce, or whatever they actually provide. Red Bull is the strongest car there, 110%. Another team that could be competitive in the straight line speed, funny enough, has been Aston Martin. They were the fastest team in Qatar, and they've actually been working, and there should be upgrades coming here. More on upgrades than everybody in my next video on Monday. You guys know that's the biggest upgrades video. That's where I'll talk about it and go more into depth about that. But I'm not really circulating that into where my predictions are going to lie with this Grand Prix. Because we have previous data and going off of upgrades, it requires a little bit of luck to get the setup right, but also at the same time, it's not accurate as to what we could be seeing. So McLaren is another team that I think would be to look out for, even in Sector 3. This is where I think Ferrari could do very well, and Mercedes. I think Mercedes will actually be the strongest team in Sector 3. Then it would probably be Red Bull, then McLaren, then Ferrari. But it's very close in between Sector 3. And a lot of lap time can be made here, especially going into those slow speed corners like 12, 13, 14, 15. That's going to be a big emphasis on lap time. Obviously, slow speed is always where the emphasis is on lap time, because hitting that accelerator as quick as you can and hitting it before any other car gives you a lot more lap time. Red Bull is great on his mechanical grip, so I expect him to be very strong here as well. Regardless of that though, in qualifying, actually keeping the tire alive is very important, because you're not going to really shred it in Sector 1. Maybe your front right is going to get a little torn up, but not that bad. Into Sector 2, you'll be fine. It's a straight, but going into those slow speed corners and then trying to make the turns of 16, 17, and 18. I don't even know why 17 and 18 is like a corner. It should just be 16 and 17. But regardless, that little loop-de-loop where we saw that beautiful Sebastian Vettel overtake on Kevin Magnussen at the end of the race. Oh, actually like a deep memory of mine, to be honest. I thought it was a beaut. Regardless of it being P8 or P7 or whatever it was a beautiful overtake. Hopefully we see more there. And guess what? That happened because of tire strategy. Having the better tires allows you to have different overtaking zones. The main overtaking spot is going to be turn 1 and turn 12. That's mainly where it's going to be because of the DRS zones, so that's what you should be expecting. Regardless, you have to keep the tires alive, and how you go into 16, 17, and 18 will be dependent on how much you can keep the tire alive, hence why lower downforce is worse usually. And as I said, last thing to note for really the track layout is going into turn 1, you gotta be careful on your braking power. A lot of teams complained about their brakes last year. It's very important that you're very competitive in these braking zones. That's where a lot of the lap time is made, and there's a lot of elevation. Like, I've never actually seen it in person, but I know just off of pictures alone, I mean, if you look at this picture, it doesn't even do it justice. It's a huge elevation going into turn 1, which makes for a very fun track. All of the track is kind of like that, but not as excessive as turn 1 is. So lastly, let's talk about my predictions and what teams I think will be most successful. Let's talk about the top 5 in this race. Well, let's start from 5 to 1. I actually have a 5 Fernando Alonso. I think the Aston Martin car should be strong here. They found something in Qatar with more upgrades coming. I know I didn't say I'm going to incorporate it, and I'm still not. Even if the upgrades fail, let's say, and they're going off of the same pace as they had in Qatar, I think the car should be pretty successful here with a decent amount of straight line speed, and the car being pretty successful in high speed corners. I think they can be good in sectors 1 and 2. Maybe 3 will be a bit of a struggle. I'm going to say though with Fernando Alonso, P5. At P4, I'm actually going to put George Russell. Yep, maybe a little bit far-fetched, but I think the Mercedes is still going to be pretty strong here. George Russell at P4. At P3, I'm actually going to put Lewis Hamilton. I think he's going to have a very successful weekend. At P2, I'm going to put the McLaren boy, Lando Norris. I think Oscar Piastri is going to have himself kind of a bad race. It's going to be dependent on tire wear, and I think that's going to be an issue with him. He's never really driven here when it comes to this type of excessive tire wear. It should be a pretty hot weekend. So, I don't know. For some reason in my head, I don't think Oscar Piastri is going to really hold it out. I think cars are going to be very close here, and it's going to be tough for him to stick it with the big boys. So I'm going to put Lando Norris in P2, and obviously King Max going to be P1, who's been really leading the whole entire year in racing. Regardless of that fact, I think we should expect a banger of a race. It should be very close between P2 to really like even P6 and 7. I think it's going to be very competitive, and I think we have ourselves a banger per usual. But I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. Did you guys enjoy the video? And what are your guys' predictions? Leave them in the comments below. I'll reply. Love to see it. Thank you guys so much for the support. Please leave a like, subscribe. It'd mean the world. And peace.